All right, so good morning, everybody. If I haven't had the pleasure to meet you yet, my name is Hannah Hough. I'm the Ag Educator for Tulsa County. And I want to thank you guys for joining us this morning for our second class in the Fall Small Acreage series, where we're going to talk about backyard chickens today. Just a couple of housekeeping things. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat as we go along, or raise your hand, unmute yourself. Don't feel like you need to save your questions until the end. I'm happy to answer those at any time. And if you don't have a question, please try to keep yourself muted. That way we don't have any conflicting sounds. So we will go ahead and get started. Here is our non-discrimination statement by OSU Extension and the United States Department of Agriculture. And our objectives for today for backyard chickens, we want to talk about poultry nutrition, parasites and diseases that you may experience with your flock, or things that you can keep on your radar to prevent from. Biosecurity will touch on high-path avian influenza, housing and equipment, Oklahoma regulations and policy, urban considerations, and I also added a holistic, natural chicken care approach section as well. So we'll start off with nutrition. So the basic needs of life for not only poultry, but all animals, humans included: protein, carbohydrates, fat, vitamins, minerals, and it shows you on there, so you may be able to cheat, but what do you guys think is the most important out of all of those? What would be that most limiting factor?
Everything has to have water.
Absolutely, yes. Great job, Stacy. So water. Animals, humans alike, they cannot absorb the vitamins, minerals, and nutrients that we give them if they don't have adequate and clean water. So not only do we need to make sure they have enough water, but we want to make sure it's clean water too. So like I mentioned, it limits and encourages nutrient absorption. So when it limits nutrient absorption, it's either not a good water source or they don't have enough water. And then encouraging nutrient absorption is clean and adequate water. It's needed for all stages of growth and development. It's also needed for cooling down, especially for chickens, because they do not sweat. They don't have the capability to sweat. So we want to make sure that they have unlimited, clean, fresh water sources needed at all times for livestock and poultry. So for poultry nutrition, the right diet is super important. You want to feed according to the age and goal of production. So young chicks versus more mature laying hens, and then laying hens versus meat production. If we're feeding broilers versus feeding laying hens, we're going to feed them a little bit differently. We never want to feed scratch as a complete ration. Scratch is built as a supplement and doesn't meet nutrient requirements for any stage, age, size, or production goals. And then here's just a quick picture. On the top right, you can see some of the different types of feed that you'll see in different sizes. So mash and crumbles are really, really finely ground pieces. Crumbles are a little bit coarser than mash is, and then our pellets, of course. And then here's a picture of scratch grains as well. And then the bottom right is a quick snippet of what nutrient requirements would be for those different classes of birds. So if we see starter broilers that are 0 to 6 weeks of age, so young chicks, they need around 23% protein. And then some of the minerals that are important for them are calcium and phosphorus. In a percentage of their diet, they need 0.9% of calcium and 0.5% of phosphorus. And then with the finisher broilers, so 6 weeks and older until it's time to harvest those birds, they do great on around 10% of protein and slightly less calcium, but the same number of phosphorus. And you'll see all classes and ages of birds, I'm sorry, not livestock, need the same amount of phosphorus. And then our pullets, starters, around 20% protein. Our developers from 8 to 20 weeks old, 14% protein. And then laying hens, which are mature and old enough to be laying eggs, they do well on around 16% protein and then 3% calcium, which is quite a bit higher than all the other classes. Why would laying hens need more calcium? Does anybody know? And you can unmute yourself or put in the chat, either one.
Because they are making the eggs.
Yes, that's what we use. That's what they use to make that hard shell layer. It's calcium. So they need quite a bit more of it because they're using a lot more calcium in their body to produce eggs. So here are some basic nutrient analysis of chick starter and grower in the top left, bottom left, scratch, and then on the right side, laying hen mash. These are typical nutrient analysis of what you're going to see on the feed tag of the feed that you're getting. No matter what feed store or co-op or farm ranch store, wherever you're buying your feed from, those feed tags all have set standards that they have to have listed on there. So on the right-hand side, how to read a feed tag, there's going to be a product name. There's going to be a purpose statement. So this one for Purina Start and Grow Amp, it's medicated. It is a type C medicated feed, and purpose statement is complete feed for starting and growing layer chickens. If it is medicated, there will be an active ingredient listed and the concentration of that. And then we have a guaranteed analysis that will go through things like protein, lysine, methionine, fat, fiber, calcium, and other important minerals as well. And typically those are in a percentage again. And then there's going to be a feed ingredients category. And the way those feed ingredients are listed, the first ingredient on that list is what's most present in the feed. So like this one, first ingredient is ground corn. Out of all of the other ingredients on that feed tag in that feed, ground corn is of the highest prevalence in that feed. And then there's directions for use, feed and management instructions. There's manufacturer and distributor information. And then there's also storage information on how to store that feed. And it lists any precautionary statements and warnings that apply to that feed as well. And so typically, like I said, chick starter and grower, around 17% protein. Our laying hen mash, 15 to 18% protein, kind of varies. And then scratch around 9% protein. So we mentioned here's our on the bottom right, this is our minimum requirements. So we want to try to choose a feed that lines up with those minimum requirements depending on the age and the goal of production for those birds. And here's a big close-up of reading a feed tag with all the different parts of the feed tag, like I mentioned. And when we're looking at poultry nutrition, we want to limit extras. So kitchen waste, such as your veggie or fruit peelings, scraps, bread, etc., as well as plant waste like lawn clippings, garden leftovers. We want to limit those to no more than 10% of your chicken's daily feed. Too many scraps could cause your chickens to become overweight, and in severe cases, could stop them from laying due to a lack of proper nutrition. So those pre-built poultry feeds, those are balanced rations for those animals. That should include all of the vitamins, minerals, protein, fat, all the good things that they need. So it's good to focus on feeding a very balanced ration for them, where in this case, if you're feeding scraps, it could vary quite a bit of how much protein's in it or how many vitamins and minerals are in it, so on and so forth. And thinking of plant waste too, if you're feeding lawn clippings or garden leftovers, it's really important to think about what's been done to that area. If we've used pesticides on the area or insecticides or herbicides, any of those things, we want to make sure that we are, feeding those according to the label of the products that were used. As far as pesticides go, if there's a withdrawal period for any type of livestock grazing or feeding or anything like that, we want to adhere to that. So another good reason to limit those extras. Does anybody have any questions so far on the nutrition side of it or any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Our chickens, we have about 30, and we kind of free range them in a cage and then let them out in the lawn during the day and let them go back in at night. And about 8 months out of the year, we get a dozen or more a day of eggs. And then this time of year, we get 3 eggs. What's our problem?
So chickens actually have a molting period, where they will, sort of shut down in a way. They will stop producing as many eggs, and that's due to weather change, light hours change, and sometimes they can get broody as well, and that will make them stop laying. But I would encourage you to make sure you are feeding them the nutrient requirements that they need. But it is common when it starts to cool down and when our light hours start to change for them to go into a molting period and lay less eggs in this time of year. Normally it wouldn't happen until it gets quite a bit cooler. But essentially they're just molting.
Okay.
But that could, if they're molting early, that could be a nutrition issue. May not be a nutrition issue, but definitely one thing to consider. A very important thing to consider is the nutrition that they're receiving.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. So our next topic that we're gonna go through is parasites. And before we talk about parasites, I'd just like to quickly ask everybody. I know Mary has mentioned she's got a flock of about 30 chickens. For the others that have joined us this morning, do you guys already have chickens? Are you looking to get chickens? If so, are you looking at laying hens or are you wanting meat birds? I'd like to hear what some of you guys' goals are, or if you have chickens already or not. And like I said, you can put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself, either way. If we don't have anybody, I am gonna pick on Stacy so she can share with you guys about her wonderful McMansion that she has. It says, so we did get a couple of responses in the chat. Sean says don't have any yet, looking at getting laying hens, which this is a great place to start. Elaine has chickens. She has egg layers. And then Cancela says, I have laying hens. We have straight runs, so ended up with some roosters as well. That always seems to happen. So I think a lot of people are in the same boat as you, Cancela.
Yeah, we
Stacy's
have
probably gotten a few straight runs too.
you would think so, and then the next thing you know, there pops up like 2 roosters. So it's kind of like, well, not exactly, but yes. We've been doing this for about, I know at least 3 years now. And we just recently added quail. So we're waiting on them any day now to start laying theirs. And it's been an eye-opening information event, going from just laying hens to quails, you know, basically what they kind of need in order to get the proper nutrition and their water, because they go through a lot of water, a lot.
Yep, absolutely. And then Tina wrote in the chat too. She says we have laying hens. Used to have about 25, but a stray dog came along and destroyed the flock. We are rebuilding. We plan to do meat chickens soon, hopefully in the spring. Sorry to hear that happen, Tina. Hopefully the rebuilding process is going well. Thank you guys for sharing about what you've got going on. So we're going to talk about parasites. First, we'll talk about internal parasites. Typically, those get picked up from the soil or from the grass or whatever the chickens may be in the area that they're in, picking up things from the grass, the soil. There's direct and indirect internal parasites. Some clinical signs of that could be a poor appetite, diarrhea, weight loss, having rough feathers, being anemic, appearing pale, weakness, or laying fewer eggs. So that may be another thing, Mary, that if you haven't considered deworming your flock, maybe time to do that. Always good to do some preventative measures on parasites anyway. So even if that's not the problem, may still be a good thing to consider. There's quite a few different internal parasites out there. We've got tapeworms, roundworms, threadworms, gapeworms, cecal worms, and eyeworms. And then diagnosis for that, we would look at a fecal exam to diagnose internal parasites in livestock. The presence of eggs mean that adult parasites are typically also present inside the bird because those eggs had to come from somewhere, right? We can also look at a post-mortem examination if those birds have died. And some of the dewormers that we can use are fenbendazole, which is available as a water-soluble formulation to be added to drinking water. Product name is called Safeguard Aquasol. There may be others out there, but you want to look for that active ingredient of fenbendazole. And it's labeled for use in chickens, and that is the only one currently approved. And if you guys have other livestock or have experience with other livestock, you probably know that it is pretty easy for those livestock to develop, or for the parasites, I guess, technically, to develop resistances to those active ingredients. So we don't want to overdo it because, like I said, that's the only one approved currently out there. So in other livestock, we would typically recommend switching what active ingredient you're using. That way there's no resistance buildup there. But there are other natural, more holistic things that we can look at that encourages deworming in chickens. One of those is pumpkins and pumpkin seeds, and chickens love pumpkins. So that's something that you can incorporate into your management practices. I know a lot of people right now, with it being October and fall time, a lot of people will you can take a pumpkin and make like a small outline of a jack-o'-lantern using like a knife. Don't cut it all the way through, but make some sort of like little line for them, and you can peel off some of that outer layer, of the pumpkin, and they will actually pick and eat at those areas, and your chickens can make a jack-o'-lantern, which is pretty cute. But they love pumpkins, and it is great for them to have. And like I said, you can still use the fenbendazole. We just want to be careful with it and make sure that we're not encouraging resistance of that in our flock. Some external parasites that we may see are mites, lice, ticks, fleas, and bedbugs, which is a little more uncommon, but still possible. So stick-type fleas we'll find on the skin, around the eyes, comb, face, and wattle. So if you can see on that close-up picture of that chicken above their eye, that's where those stick-type fleas are. And there's a really zoomed in, blown up picture of what a stick tight flea looks like under a microscope. They're tiny little suckers. They are blood feeders, immature stages of fleas in the soil and bedding. So in a little bit, we'll talk about biosecurity. Lots of reasons that biosecurity is important, but one of those is to prevent parasites. And then these can affect young, old, or sick birds. So mostly clean and biosecurity management is the important thing on preventing these. There's also fowl or blue ticks. They're blood feeders as well. They spread diseases, can cause anemia, weakness, and weight loss. The adult ticks feed only on birds at night. Tick larvae stay on the bird to feed during the day. And you can find those on your chickens, typically under the wings. Look for tiny ticks embedded in skin and or red spots. Those red spots would be left behind from after them feeding and detaching themselves from the animal. And then on the right, top right hand, there's a big illustration of what those ticks typically look like. And they're only 6 to 9 millimeters large normally, so they're pretty small. And we also have the northern fowl mite. Some symptoms include weakness, anemia, a decrease in egg production, reduced feed intake. They reside in the vent area of the bird, but also again can be in the bedding or coop. So we want to pay attention to our biosecurity measures again. And these tiny things are 0.6 to 1 millimeter long. So they are very little. That blew up picture of the chicken's feathers, those fowl mites you can see are really small. And then there's also poultry lice. The eggs are typically visible on the feather shaft near the base. So you can see in this picture, if you look at the very base of that feather, you can see they're called nits or eggs. You can kind of see the eggs formed there. They can cause severe skin irritation and occurs from lice feeding on the dry skin cells, feathers, and scabs. Typically, those birds will appear stressed and in poor health. So here's an overall picture of what to look for when examining the bird to make sure that we don't have external parasites going on. You want to inspect their face, comb, and wattles for the stick-tight fleas. You want to look under their feathers, under their wings, in the vent region to make sure there's no poultry lice or fowl mites. You can look under the wings for the fowl ticks. And then another type of mite, scaly leg mite, you want to inspect their legs and feet. If they do have scaly leg mite, typically they'd have lifted or uneven scales and thickening and crusting of those areas. So now we're going to get into our biosecurity portion, which is essentially just a set of practices designed to prevent the spread of disease by minimizing the movement of pathogenic organisms like viruses and bacteria, thereby protecting livestock and poultry. Plays a crucial role in maintaining the health of animals by securing your operations against the introduction and transmission of infectious diseases, or in this case, external parasites as well. Effective biosecurity measures focus on resisting potential threats, isolating our sick animals, controlling traffic on and off the premises, and maintaining sanitation. In ag settings, biosecurity measures are essential for protecting livestock from diseases such as avian influenza or other infectious diseases, and they often include procedures for quarantining new animals, disinfecting equipment, and maintaining clean facilities. So quickly, I want to touch on avian influenza. It seems like it has slowed down quite a bit in the media, but a few months ago, earlier in the year, it was a really hot topic in the media. So I just like to touch on this to give a little bit of background information on avian influenza and high path avian influenza, since we're seeing it quite a bit in the meat. So avian influenza is also commonly known as bird flu. It's a highly contagious infection or viral infection that primarily affects birds, but could also affect humans and other animals. I know some of the cases that we might have seen or heard about this year were actually in dairy cows. So it's not just limited to birds, but also other livestock as well. The disease is caused by influenza type A viruses, which can be found in various bird species, including domesticated poultry, such as chicken and turkeys, as well as wild birds, such as ducks and geese. And a lot of the times, that's how we see this being spread. Areas where ducks, geese, and other birds are flying over, and defecating on those areas, that's typically where we see that pathogen being transferred to other animals, is through the migration of wild birds. Avian influenza viruses are categorized into two groups based on their pathogenic properties. So there's low path avian influenza and high path avian influenza. Low path usually causes mild symptoms in birds and often goes unnoticed. And then high path avian influenza can lead to severe disease and high mortality rates in domestic poultry, leading to devastating losses in the poultry industry. A high path virus can be spread rapidly among domestic flocks through direct contact with infected birds or indirectly via contaminated feed, equipment, and clothing. So like we mentioned, this is why biosecurity is so important. Symptoms of high path in poultry could include sudden death, respiratory distress, decreased egg production, and visible signs of illness, such as swelling or discoloration of comb and wattles. I want to preface that with saying those symptoms could be other issues going on as well. So if you ever notice those symptoms in your chickens, don't automatically assume that they have avian influenza or some other type of disease. A lot of the symptoms show up in a lot of different things or issues. Some of these symptoms even show up with nutrient deficiencies. So we want to make sure that we're building a good relationship with our veterinarian, reaching out to our veterinarian to get help on true diagnosis and good treatment for those animals. Wild birds, particularly waterfowl, like I mentioned, often carry the virus without displaying any symptoms and can transmit it over long distances during migration. As a zoonotic disease, avian influenza can also infect humans, but such cases are rare and typically result from close contact with infected birds. Like I mentioned, call your veterinarian, build a good relationship with them for any livestock health concerns. And if you haven't found a veterinarian for your poultry flock, now is a great time to reach out and build that relationship. It is not the best time to build a relationship with a veterinarian at 2 o'clock in the morning when you've got sick or dead or dying birds in an emergency. It's a great time to reach out to them and build that relationship now, and then get to know you and get to know your flock and your management practices now before any emergencies may arise. So some preventative measures for avian influenza: limiting contact, keep domestic birds away from wild birds if at all possible, particularly during migratory seasons when wild birds can carry the virus. It's crucial to prevent your chickens from accessing areas frequented by wild birds. Indoor housing, if possible, keep your chickens indoors or in a fully enclosed run to reduce their exposure to wild bird droppings. This is especially important when waterfowl are migrating again. So other preventative measures included keeping it clean, biosecurity practices, maintain strict sanitation protocols, use dedicated clothing and footwear when handling your poultry, and ensure that any equipment used is clean and disinfected before use. So using dedicated clothing and footwear when handling your poultry is not only good for you to keep you healthy, but also important because you could potentially pick up that pathogen anywhere and carry it and bring it back to your flock. So think about it as a two-way street, not just a one-way street. Not only can they bring that to us, or the wild birds bring that to them, or whatever the case may be, but we can also carry that and accidentally share that with them as well. And then visitor control, limit the number of visitors to your poultry housing areas. If visitors must enter, ensure they follow biosecurity protocols, such as foot baths and changing clothing. Monitor health. Be vigilant in monitoring your chicken's health. Look out for symptoms of illness, such as increased mortality rates, coughing, being lethargic, and report any sudden health changes to local authorities. And again, work with your veterinarians on this, because it may not be high path avian influenza. It could be something else going. By following these practices, you can significantly reduce the risk of avian influenza affecting your backyard flock. For a more comprehensive understanding, you can reach out to us at OSU Extension. And if we don't have the resources or the information that you need, there's lots of other agencies out there that we work with that we keep versed up on, so we can share those resources with you. And if you're not located in Tulsa County, if you're in another county, all 77 counties in Oklahoma have a county extension office. We all have ag educators located at those extension offices. So reach out to your county extension ag educator or ag agent, and feel free to ask them questions to learn more about not only avian influenza, but just overall health. So here is a good biosecurity fact sheet from OSU. Small flock biosecurity for prevention of avian influenza. And a lot of what that fact sheet recommends is just in general, good biosecurity practices. So not only can it help prevent things like avian influenza, but it can help prevent a lot of other things as well. There's also a current status on the Center of Disease Control that you can look at for the bird flu to see what the current status in the United States is. And then there's also some updates from OSU to look at high path avian influenza. Since they did their major update in the last part of 2024, they've had a couple of other updates as well. General biosecurity, supportive care, prevention and treatment options. Environmental modifications are important, such as making sure they have dry, clean bedding at all times, fresh, clean water, and fresh feed as well. Pay attention to your watering and feeding locations. If you notice it's a high traffic area that gets really dirty, or if it's an exposed area that's not covered, like we mentioned, the wild birds coming through and leaving droppings, try to move those areas to a better location. We want to quarantine sick birds or new birds. So if you guys have any birds at home that are showing sick signs, maybe you don't know what the illness is yet, but even if you notice those signs, try to quarantine them while you're figuring out what's going on, and quarantine them for a certain period of time, depending on what the illness is or what the case may be. General rule of thumb is quarantining for at least 21 days. But again, consult with your veterinarian on what's going on, and they can give you best recommendations for that specific situation. Like we've mentioned a bunch already, keep the area clean. We want to minimize wild animal contact with the flock, of course, and then some treatment and control options for parasites for the bird themselves. You can cleanse with warm water and 1 to 2 drops of mild dishwashing soap. A treatment, you can use petroleum jelly for fleas, and then pesticide sprays in the chicken area and yard to keep those pests away and to kill those pests. In their coop, you can use high pressure water to cracks and crevices to clean all of that out, and make sure you're using hot water to kill those pathogens and to rid those pests. Does anybody have any questions on the biosecurity measures? And I know a lot of these may seem kind of extreme, but I think you'll find it's much more worthwhile to practice caution and to follow those biosecurity measures. That way something, you know, drastic and tragic doesn't happen in your flock. Because I know like some of those they can spread pretty quickly, and sometimes if symptoms go unnoticed or whatever, this is extreme again, but could lose an entire flock from something going on. So better to be safe than sorry. And if we don't have any questions, I'm going to get into the holistic and natural care part of the presentation. So some foundational health practices, like we mentioned again, clean, dry coop. Not only does this help prevent parasites and pathogens, can help reduce things like coccidiosis, respiratory issues. We want ventilation without drafts, helps respiratory health. Rotating or resting runs can prevent parasite buildup in overgrazed ground. Having access to dust baths, which is essential for mite and lice prevention, and then give them a diverse diet and clean water, which we like to view as the real natural medicine. So some dietary and herbal supplements that you can do are fermenting your feed. For that, you soak your feed in water for 24 to 48 hours. It will smell tangy and not rotten. This increases beneficial lactic acid bacteria, which improves nutrient absorption, also boosts gut microbiome, so very gut healthy, and reduces feed waste. Stacy, I think you guys do some fermented feed things too, don't you?
Yes. So we have the fermented feed that we give them in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we actually do sprouts, lentil sprouts. So we tried to take more of a holistic approach to this and make sure, because, you know, we want to make sure that we're not over medicating them and we're taking this approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Stacy. So and I want to pause for just a moment. So all of these holistic and natural care recommendations that I'm going to go through, they are research supported. There's some information out there from OSU Extension and some other agencies. But I want you guys to go out and do your own research, find your own peer-reviewed, scientific-based, factual information before you decide to incorporate any specific practices into your flock. And again, build a relationship with a veterinarian, reach out to them to get their recommendations and their expertise on it as well. Another one that you can consider doing with your flock is giving apple cider vinegar. Recommend using 1 tablespoon per gallon of water. You want to avoid metal containers in this situation. I believe the apple cider vinegar will actually eat away at that metal and will put metal into the water. So why it works, it could improve gut health, slightly acidify the digestive tract to reduce harmful bacteria, and also improves calcium uptake, which for our laying hens, like we mentioned, is really important. But word of caution, don't use continuously, alternate with plain water every few days. So you're not giving apple cider vinegar to them constantly. This would be something that you rotate every few days. Another one that you can use is garlic. Use freshly crushed or powdered in feed. You can give a few cloves per flock per week. It's shown to support immunity, reduce internal parasites, and act as a mild antibacterial, which if you guys have ever heard or looked at human medicinal herbs and things like that, for humans, garlic is also known as a mild antibacterial as well. So I thought that was kind of interesting. You can mix into fermented feed or mash to improve the palatability. So palatability essentially is just how tasty it is to them. So improving palatability would help make it tastier so they would actually consume that. You can also mix both garlic and apple cider vinegar and water a couple of days per week to promote gut balance and deter internal parasites. Oregano. You can use dried or fresh in feed or infuse it into the water. So this contains Sarviprol and thymol, which are natural antimicrobials shown in studies to reduce Salmonella and E. coli in poultry. You can use oregano oil in very small amounts to, a lot of times are in commercial poultry supplements. So you may notice on your feed tag, look and see if it has oregano oil in there. External health and parasite control holistic approaches are an herbal dust bath mix. You can mix this into dry dirt or sand and use 1 part ash, which is a parasite deterrent, 1 part food grade diatomaceous earth. This is optional and we don't want to overuse it, but it is very effective and very helpful. And then 1 part dried herbs of lavender, rosemary, mint, or wormwood, or a mix of those. And it naturally repels lice and mites and promotes breeding, which is good for them. Coop sprays and nesting herbs. You can spray white vinegar and water, a 1-to-1 ratio, or diluted essential oils like eucalyptus or peppermint. Again, very mild. Never use it directly on birds and use a very small amount, excuse me. Nesting herbs, such as dried lavender, mint, and marigold, help deter insects and promote calmness. I've noticed a lot of people around their chicken coop, a lot of times like to plant like dried lavender, or not dried lavender, but they like to plant mint, lavender, marigolds, rosemary, other herbs. Because not only does it help deter insects, but it also does promote calmness, and it looks pretty too. So some seasonal and stress support. You can make an electrolyte or herbal recovery water. Use this after heat stress, transport, or molting. You can also use this if they get really broody and they're struggling with brooding. You can use this electrolyte recovery water. The mix would be a teaspoon of sugar or honey, a pinch of salt, a pinch of baking soda, in 1 quart of water, and you can add herbs like mint or basil leaves for antioxidants. On the teaspoon of sugar or honey, I would use something that is 100% natural, unprocessed, and I wouldn't use some type of alternative sweetener. I would use true honey, probably raw honey, or just plain cane sugar. There's also a malt support mix. You can add sunflower seeds, mealworms, or high protein sprouts, such as lentils or mung beans, to help feather regrowth naturally. Again, good natural approaches, but we want to be cautious and not use too much. Diatomaceous earth, again, it's effective for mites, but can irritate their lungs because it is a dust. So we want to use it outdoors and use it sparingly. Essential oils, never apply those undiluted. Chickens are sensitive, and we never want to apply those essential oils directly onto the animal. Copper sulfate or strong vinegar doses can upset digestion if they're overused. So here's some of the sources and research that I did to find those recommendations. Oklahoma State University Extension and University of Arkansas Extension. They have quite a few backyard poultry management resources that include some holistic recommendations. The Journal of Applied Poultry Research, and then the United States Department of Agriculture Ag Research Service had some data and studies as well. But like I mentioned, I encourage you guys to do your own research and find your own factual, scientific based research before you incorporate any of these, or consult with your veterinarian as well. Do we have any questions so far? I haven't seen anything come through the chat, but I just want to take a moment and make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, so housing and equipment, there is a ton of different ways that you can build your chicken coop. Practical standpoint, making sure it's very practical use is important, but you can also make them as pretty as you want. You can make them as do it yourself as you want, or you can buy kits. That is totally up to you. There's tons of different ways to design your coop. I've seen people make them almost match perfectly with their house or look like little mini versions of their house and look really pretty. Tons of different ways that you can do it, which I think is really interesting. I like seeing all the different designs that people come up with. But there are some set standards that we want to pay attention to when we're designing our chicken coop. Adequate space is one of the first things that's very important for smaller breeds. Smaller chickens in-house, they require 1 to 1.5 square foot per bird. In the chicken run, they require 4 to 6 square foot per bird. And then our larger breeds, our big laying hens, in-house require 2 to 3 square foot per bird, and in run require 8 to 10 square foot per bird. And there's actually regulations through ODAF, Oklahoma Department of Ag, Food and Forestry, that have specific guidelines on space. And that's where I got these from. For feeding space, you want 2 to 4 inches per adult bird. So if you had 10 adult birds, you'd need 20 to 40 inches of straight, round, or etc. feeders. So they have plenty of space to share feed. Our waterers, a 1 gallon drinker can supply 12 to 15 adults during the cool weather time and 12 adults or less during warm weather. So we want to make sure we're providing additional waters as a buffer and make sure that they've got access to clean, adequate water at all times. And we don't want to limit water either. Here's some different options for waterers, places like Atwood's, Tractor Supply, Stillwater Milling Company, other Ma and Pa feed stores. Those things have lots of different options for waters that you can purchase, but you can also consider making your own waterers. There's tons of YouTube videos out there and blogs and things like that that have tons of different really unique and practical ways to reuse or repurpose things and make waterers. And same with the feeders as well. You can go out and buy feeders that work great. You can also build your own feeders if you feel so inclined to. And like I said, repurpose materials if you like. So when we're looking at our coop, don't forget ventilation and proper fencing. Want to make sure you've got ventilation at the top of the coop and the roof. You could also add shading material on the outside of your run. Fencing or netting should also be added on top of the run to protect from predators. Choose fencing panels or wire with holes smaller than 1/2 inch so we don't have predators or pests or things that can get inside. And it's also good to bury your fence 12 inches underneath the low ground to protect from chickens digging out and predators digging in, like raccoons or stray dogs, things like that. So I'm going to run through some Oklahoma regulations and policies. There is a great fact sheet that OSU Extension has put together called A Guide to Marketing Locally Produced Eggs in Oklahoma. It is a very helpful resource to break down what the regulations are for eggs and the different circumstances that may change those regulations. So the Oklahoma Department of Ag, Food and Forestry is another one. They have a quick reference called Bringing Farm to Market, what to know before selling your fresh produce, dairy, eggs, meats, baked items, and processed foods. So it breaks down what those requirements and regulations are for each item that you might be selling. And there's a link on there for that. And I can share out the presentation to you guys later via email so you can directly access those. So the Oklahoma Egg Law There's two different scenarios where an egg license is required or no license required. So we'll go through the first scenario of a license not being required. Oklahoma producer of eggs shall sell ungraded eggs from hens managed on their own farm. And since there's no license required, of course, there's no fee with that. The sale must be made directly to consumers, directly from the farm they were raised. So if you guys have seen the little roadside farm stands before where people sell eggs or freshly baked bread or other goods, maybe they sell cut flowers, those types of things, they're not required to have a license with that. But those ungraded eggs cannot be sold at other outlets. You can't take them to a farmer's market. You can't take them to things like, goodness, what's it called in Collinsville? Farmhouse Hippie, those types of places you have to have a license for. And you are required to remain in compliance with all guidelines in Title II, Article 10 of Poultry and Poultry Products. That those guidelines are listed in that ODAF book that I mentioned of bringing farm to market. So it'll break that down further for you if you need that information. So when an egg license is required, is all sales of eggs off farm, whether that's grocery stores, restaurants, farmers markets. If you go to church with somebody and they want to buy eggs from you and they ask you to bring those eggs with you to church and sell those eggs to them, then that is sale of eggs off farm. Typically, or technically, that is going to require you to have a license. That license costs $50 per year, and there is guidelines in Title 35, Chapter 37, Subchapter 1 of the eggs in ODAF. And like I mentioned, that book has the breakdown of those. So grades and weight classes for shell eggs follow the guidelines established by the Poultry Division of USDA's Ag Marketing Services. There is a manual available online. You can Google USDA Egg Grading Manual, and you can actually download an online version of that if you need it. Method of egg grading follows the exact same guidelines of the USDA Egg Grading Manual. The eggs displayed for sale should be in customary containers, not in loose bulk containers, and window display signs for eggs must be plainly marked with the price, the grade of the eggs, and size of eggs. Check with your local health department before marketing shell eggs at specific farmers markets. Some local rules could exist. So just something to keep on your radar if you are wanting to take those eggs to farmers markets. Good idea to reach out to your local health department just to see if there's any extra steps that you need to take or any extra regulations there. So for those that are interested in meat birds, some of the regulations for the slaughter and sale of poultry products, there's different plans essentially, and each of those plans, each of those scenarios have different requirements. So the first one is called custom exempt or on-farm processing. There's no facility inspection required, no retail sale allowed, sale of orders made directly to consumer without third-party intervention, poultry raised by producers on their own farm, and their yearly slaughter allotment is less than 1,000 chickens. So if you're bigger than that, custom exempt does not work for you. And you must complete the certification of registration and submit to Oklahoma Food Division or approve it. The second option is state inspected slaughter facility. Must be compliant for retail sale. Requirements include applications sent to ODAF, Oklahoma Food Safety Division for approval. Slaughter facilities must be compliant with guidelines set by Oklahoma Food Safety Division. State inspector must be present during slaughter, and facility must abide by Oklahoma packaging and labeling laws. And again, there are guidelines listed in Title 35, Chapter 37, Subchapter 5 for poultry products inspection, and more information on what those two options look like to help you decide what option you may fall under and need to follow. The third and final option, USDA inspected slaughter facility, compliant for retail sale, restaurants, and interstate sales. So there's the difference between option 2 and 3. This state inspected slaughter facility would not be for interstate sale. It would just be for Oklahoma sales. This one would allow you interstate sales. Requirements: slaughter facilities must be compliant with USDA guidelines. And secondly, USDA inspector must be present during slaughter, and facility must abide by federal packaging and labeling laws. And there are guidelines in Title 35. So other regulations and policies include egg washing. Oklahoma Department of Ag, Food, and Forestry requires that they be washed in Oklahoma. There is also the European method of not washing eggs. So essentially washing eggs is washing the bloom off of that egg, and that bloom is put there naturally by chickens. It's produced naturally by chickens on the eggs. It helps keeps the eggs fresher longer. And like at home, if you have unwashed eggs that you've collected, you can store those at room temperature. As soon as you've washed them, they have to be refrigerated. They no longer have the ability to help preserve themselves. They have to be kept refrigerated. If you guys have ever visited any European countries and noticed, a lot of grocery stores, they sell their eggs unwashed and at room temperature. They're not in a refrigerated room or on refrigerated shelves. National egg safety rules say that they must be washed, stored in a new carton at 45 degrees or less. So if you are hatching eggs or incubating eggs, do not wash them. Washing the bloom off of them will make them infertile. If you are selling your eggs for hatching, selling eggs to others so they can incubate and hatch, we do not want to wash eggs. If you are keeping the eggs for eating and you're going to store them at room temperature and they're just at home for yourself, you don't have to wash them. But if you are going to refrigerate them, it's good to wash them. And then if you're selling your eggs for eating in the US, you need to wash them. So if you had a little farm stand that you wanted to set up and sell your eggs on farm through the option, let's see, where's it at? Through the Oklahoma egg law, no license required. You would wash those eggs, put them in clearly marked containers, and refrigerate them. So a lot of people would build like a little cooler into that farm stand and put ice or ice packs, things like that in there to sell them washed. They need to be washed if you're selling. Sorry, I backtracked a little bit. So here is how to wash your eggs with a 2-pan method. Your first pan is going to be a soap dish pan with hot water, food grade dish soap. Don't want it too soapy. And then pan number 2 is going to be bleach and water. You'll use a 1/4 teaspoon bleach per gallon of water and make sure it's unscented bleach. And once you run them through pan 1 and then pan 2, you're going to set them on a drying rack. Some considerations that you want to make if you haven't gotten a backyard flock yet. Some prep things to do beforehand, some questions to ask beforehand. Make sure there's respect for neighboring homes if you guys are in a home division. Think about your predators and what fencing you may need to incorporate to keep those predators out. Check your homeowners association guidelines if you live in an HOA. Those HOAs could supersede city regulations, and check your city regulations too. Also check animal health sources. Like I said, build a relationship with a veterinarian. And then think about manure management and disposal as well. If you have a garden, you can use it as wonderful fertilizer for your garden. Chicken litter is a great fertilizer for gardens and things like that. But just some things to think about before time. That way you're not having to work through those logistics when you already have your chickens. You've got some time to think about it beforehand. Some additional resources are Oklahoma Department of Ag, Food and Forestry, some contacts for their poultry and eggs department. Brian Buckwald. Again, you can refer to Safety Rules Title 35, Chapter 37. And then for meat inspections, Scott Yates, and refer to Food Safety Rules Title 35, Chapter 37. And like I said, I will send out the presentation so you have direct links, not only to these rules and regulations, but so you have their contact information too if you need it. Another option is looking at Oklahoma Gardening. They actually have quite a few videos on backyard chickens, such as backyard chicken tips, raising backyard chickens, chickens for bug control, and then coops as well, and lots of other good videos. So check them out on YouTube. We also, through OSU Extension, have a backyard chickens online course. It's a self-paced course that provides an overview of issues that new poultry owners could expect to face as they select and care for their flocks. It is $20 to take that online course, but like I mentioned, it's self-paced. So as long as you complete that course within the 30 days, you won't be timed out of it. We also have a web page under our OSU Extension programs and services. We have a backyard poultry web page that has information, links to some of those fact sheets that I mentioned and other fact sheets, and also has contact information for some of our backyard chickens and poultry experts across the state. And then I'm always happy to serve as a resource as well. If you have any follow-up questions for me, or any questions getting started on purchasing your flock, or resources that you may be looking for, more information that you may be looking for, I'm always happy to serve as a resource, and our other county extension and ag educators across the state in your local counties. Do you guys have any questions for me? That was the last part of my presentation, was going through those additional resources. So if you guys haven't had a moment to ask any questions that you may have had along the way, I will happily take those questions now. I haven't seen any come into the chat just yet, so while we're waiting for any possible questions to come through, I want to take a minute again to thank you guys for joining us this morning and learning about backyard chickens. And like I said, if you have any follow-up questions on it, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I will email the presentation out to you guys, as well as the recorded link. When Zoom generates that, I'll send that together in one email. But if you guys don't have any other questions for me, thank you guys for joining us this morning, and I hope you'll join us for the rest of our series. Next week's class is Pair Better, and that is actually an online recorded YouTube link. So we have a exclusive class for the Master Gardeners that Stacy, our FCS educator, is doing on Monday, and then she's going to record that for us and put that video together, and then we will send that YouTube link recording out on Tuesday. And then the last class in our series is October 27th. It's our Quick Breads class that Stacy will be leading. So I hope we get to see you guys for those. Hope you join us for those, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your Monday, and thank you for joining us.